It was the first day of school in the small Russian town of Beslan. The children of Middle School 1 were gathered for a celebration when 35 heavily armed men and women burst into the courtyard and started shooting.
They didn't expect to get out of this raid alive. What they really just wanted to do was just simply to strike back.
The attack was the latest in a series of spectacular hostage-taking operations carried out by Chechen militants spanning a decade, and perhaps the best evidence that the conflict in Chechnya has been radicalized by the brutality of war and the fundamentalism of international jihad.
If you kidnap one person, you can make noise, but not too much. But if you kidnap a whole school...
This presentation of Beyond the Border is made possible by a grant from the David M. Kennedy Center for International Studies at Brigham Young University. Expand your world.
The Beslan siege and subsequent massacre was arguably the most tragic episode for Russians in their 10-year war in Chechnya, and sent a powerful signal to the world that the conflict is far from resolved. A statement attributed to the notorious Chechen warlord Shamil Basayev appeared on several Islamist websites, blaming the carnage on Russian troops, but admitting to training the Beslan hostage-takers. Basayev had risen to the rank of field commander during the First War with Russia in the post-Soviet era. For most of the 20th century, Chechnya had been a republic within Russia. In 1991, the year of the Soviet Union's collapse, the Chechens, under the leadership of Zhokhar Dudayev, declared their republic an independent state. The Russian government tolerated this situation for 3 years. Then, late in 1994, Russian President Boris Yeltsin ordered troops into Chechnya to restore constitutional order and prevent civil war between competing Chechen factions. It soon became clear the real mission was to crush the Chechen independence movement and reincorporate the rebellious republic back into the Russian Federation. Russian forces suffered significant casualties at the hands of Chechen militants in fierce street fighting during a New Year's Eve attack on the Chechen capital of Grozny. The unexpected defeat forced the Russian military to regroup and turn to air power and artillery fire instead. This strategy proved devastatingly effective. And by the summer of 1995, Russian troops occupied Grozny and most Chechen territory. Ilyas Akhmadov, a Chechen fighter during the First War, describes the precarious situation facing the Chechen military shortly after the fall of Grozny.
Где-то в конце мая, начале июня русские начали масштабное наступление по обеим направлениям. Они скопились у центра. В центре Аргунского ущелья и пошли в два направления. Одно направление на Шатыль, другое на Ведено. В общем-то, в этой ситуации, когда русским удалось практически за одну неделю захватить все самые 3 главные точки опорные в горных районах, это на юго-западном.
With the Chechen military effort faltering, Basayev and a group of volunteers staged a daring raid into Russia as a last-ditch effort to avoid defeat. They made it as far as Budyonovsk.
В общем, все было изображено так, как будто везут груз 200. Груз 200, ну, это погибшие солдаты, которых обычно ложат в цинки и везут домой. С фронта, с войны часто вывозили и ходили эти колонны по Северному Кавказу. Поэтому это выглядело достаточно правдоподобно. И впереди шла...
Alkai Collins, an American mujahideen who fought in the First War, arrived in Chechnya immediately following Shamil's raid.
Basayev intended to take his 100-odd soldiers and go straight to the Kremlin and fight in the streets to the last man, but halfway there they ran out of money to pay the Russian soldiers, so they sidetracked into Budenovsk. And from what Basayev told me personally, they attacked the police station in Budenovsk. They didn't kill any civilians. They did take them hostage, and then they went to the hospital.
The Chechens took more than 1,000 hostages. After releasing dozens of women and children, Basayev waited. Russian commandos stormed the hospital on the fourth day of the standoff. But their attack was halted when hostages were forced to the windows. Finally, the Russian government agreed to negotiate.
Я бы просил вас, сейчас вы переговорите с Басаевым, свяжитесь с ним по телефону. Я готов с ним переговорить, соединимся мы с ним, но надо, чтобы рядом были все.
5000 заложников, 5000 заложников! Тронули ни одного нашего человека, не оказывает нам помощь всем!
Освободить прежде всего всех заложников. Я сейчас же приму все меры. Так, ну что я вам должен сказать?
Budenovsk was an opportunity for Shamil to talk to the Russian authorities to stop the war. That was the only way he could do it. Because the Russians were bombing hospitals, they were bombing schools, they were bombing private houses in Chechnya. And Shamil decided, okay, we need to transport this war inside Russia. Then maybe we will talk.
It showed the Russian military that they can't continue slaughtering civilians in Chechnya without payback.
Я видел Басаева за несколько дней перед тем, как они оказались в Буденновске. Для меня это был полный сюрприз, я абсолютно не знал, что они куда-то собираются.
With the lives of so many Russians in his hands, Basayev had the bargaining tool that he needed to not only force the Russians to agree to a ceasefire in Chechnya, but grant him and his men safe passage home.
What Budenovsk did was in a way put the war back on the map for ordinary Russian people. Made the war not something that's happening a long way away to other people, but something that was actually going to also affect Russians themselves. So effectively it made Russians begin to feel vulnerable and began the process that would eventually lead to a ceasefire a year later.
Was relatively successful because the hostage-taking there led directly to Russia agreeing to a ceasefire with the Chechen rebels. I think that without that ceasefire in the summer of 1995, the Russians would actually have occupied the whole country and suppressed the large-scale, shall we say, armed resistance. But on that occasion, Russian public opinion was overwhelmingly in favor of trying to find a compromise with the rebels.
Я думаю, что то, что произошло в Буденновске, русским помешало завершить операцию, как они говорили, полного разгрома на этих двух направлениях, что, по сути дела, не было ни одной даже маломальской высотки, где у них не были поставлены огневые точки.
Basayev's raid was so popular in Chechnya that in January 1996, another field commander, Salman Raduyev, led what appeared to be a copycat raid into Russia.
По приказу Дудаева возглавлял войсковую диверсионную операцию по уничтожению военных объектов России в городе Кизляре.
I had already been wounded at the time, so I was out of action, but I was still there. And I remember, well, if I wasn't hit, I probably would have gone on the operation with him. I don't even remember what the goals of the operation were.
В Кизляре была военная перевалочная база вертолетная. Вот из России туда перевозили ракеты Нурции на вертолеты. Значит, оттуда их, как перевалочную базу, переправляли сюда, в Чечню, и здесь распределяли по войскам. Как раз таки Дудаев приказал, чем воевать отдельно с разными подразделениями вертолетными, лучше их базу уничтожить там, чтобы они не имели возможности.
Они не смогли окончательно овладеть этой базой, и неудача там вынудила их отступить в центр города, захватить заложники больницу. Я не знаю, сколько там, по-моему, около 1000 человек было. И я думаю, что Радуев с трудом себе представлял, что он хочет сделать, кроме того, чтобы соперничать с Басаевым. Радуев с первых же дней, выдвинув одну цель, он очень быстро пошел на компромисс.
Basayev had gained tremendous prestige among the Chechens by his Budyonovsk raid, and Raduyev, who was, if you like, a rival warlord, wanted to carry out something equally spectacular.
Для русских, конечно, невозможно было повторение Буденновска, я имею в виду, для Кремля это было абсолютно невозможно, поэтому, в принципе, здесь просто речь шла о том, чтобы усыпить Радуева, выдвинуть его из густонаселенного города более или менее безопасным, и постараться освободить заложников и уничтожить группу Радуева.
Raduyev's hostage-laden convoy was stopped in the Russian town of Pervomaisk, only 10 miles from the Chechen border. There, the Russian military encircled Raduyev's force and prepared to attack.
In this case, it wasn't nearly so much of a success, partly because the people taken hostage were fellow Muslims from Dagestan. So this wasn't just taking Russians hostage, this was almost indiscriminate savagery.
Many hostages and soldiers were killed in the ensuing battle, and Raduyev escaped to Chechnya, losing 97 men and winning nothing from the Russians.
Though it must be said the Russians bungled the whole operation as well as so often, and in fact most of the rebels did escape, but it was much less clear-cut and successful than Budyonovsk.
So many Chechens think he did that just to show off.
Despite the 2 raids into Russian territory, the war dragged on until Chechen fighters seized and held Grozny in August 1996, forcing the Russians to the negotiating table. The result was independence for Chechnya in all but name. A final decision on Chechnya's official status was put off until December 31st, 2001.
Сказать солдатским матерям, что сегодня на территории Чеченской Республики не погибает.
The First War had been won by fierce fighting and independence rhetoric, punctuated by a visible return to Islam. But the nature of Islam in Chechnya is subject to political manipulation.
Или мы должны получить свободу, независимость, или, сражаясь, значит, Российская империя, но не покоряясь, должны уйти к Аллаху. Мы мусульмане, у нас у каждого человека своя религия. Вся наша сила заключается в вере Всевышнего Аллаха.
Ислам не может играть какую-то роль в жизни, когда сама жизнь — это и есть ислам.
During the war, foreign Islamic militants, or mujahideen, converged on Chechnya to fight the Russians and wage jihad, or holy war. Many brought with them a more radical and less tolerant brand of Islam than the one traditionally practiced by the Chechens.